Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 180th ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great, Cameron. Winter Olympics are going on. Kind of fun. Didn't we just have Olympics like last summer?
Mm-hmm.
COVID reset everything.
Is that how that usually works?
I didn't know.
Every two...
No, they postponed it a year. Normally it's every 2 years.
I gotcha.
Anyways, Shaun White is in finals tonight. And
Did you watch him in the semifinals?
Yeah, it was really late at night. A couple nights ago, Monday or Tuesday, he fell on his first run. It was really late. I had to go to bed. But after I went to bed, his second run, he did really well, qualified for finals, and that's tonight. And we're going to try and do this really quickly so producer Cameron can watch it.
Mm-hmm. You a big Shaun White fan?
Oh, yeah. Top Mount Rushmore of action sports.
Oh, yeah. He's on there.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
He's like 35.
That's
years old.
Way too old to be good at snowboarding. Probably.
I would assume. For most people.
I remember loving watching him, especially, I have no idea what year it was, probably 2018, when he had that, he was in all black with like a motorcycle helmet looking thing going on. Looked really cool, jumping way higher than everybody else on the half pipe.
They always do look so cool with their goggles and whatnot. Is that like the right terminology?
Yeah.
Snowboard goggles. You knew that was the right terminology.
Well, I just don't,
Kyle, one thing, before we get started with anything Mizzou related, one thing that happened last week that we didn't talk about that was kind of interesting is the Washington football team renamed themselves and announced they're going to be called the Washington Commanders.
Boo.
And I know producer Cameron has thoughts on this as a graphic designer and just as a person who likes cool things. Take it away. What do you think? Besides boo.
Okay. Not awesome. I don't love it. Honestly,
I don't think many people do.
No, and I saw, I think it was in the Discord, someone said something about it, and I read it as Commodores. And I was like, and then I went about my business. I didn't open it or anything. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Then later I opened it, I was like, Commanders? It's like, what the heck is this?
Vanderbilt Commodores.
Way better.
Yeah.
They probably hired a search firm to come up or something to come up with that. They had 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might as well just kept it football team.
They should have.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I never thought before, and maybe I'm just dumb for not realizing this, but they could have just went. You were saying they could have just leaned into the whole how soccer clubs are called, the whatever football club.
Yeah.
They could have leaned into that a little bit with the Washington football team, and just styled their whole thing.
Yeah, because nothing about, especially with their they didn't even come up with a Commanders logo. It's just the word Commanders, which I'm like, you could have done that with just Washington.
Yeah,
you could have done the same thing with that. There's nothing. They just have a name now.
Right.
The uniforms are kind of cool. They have some interesting textures and stuff on the uniform. But
you felt them?
Yep, they sent me some. They're like, we want you to review this.
Especially the textures.
Especially the textures of these jerseys. Anyway.
Well, we know graphic design is your passion, so
yeah.
I wanted to give you a chance to give your thoughts on that. Somebody else in the Discord, now I've seen this a million times since then, but this is the first time I saw them referred to as the commies. I thought that was pretty funny. I might call them that. I also might just call them the Commodores because that's a better name. Yeah.
Commanders is going to take a long time to get used to.
It just doesn't really roll off the tongue for me for whatever reason.
That hard A sound.
Yeah.
Something that's just kind of abrasive.
Mm-hmm.
How do I segue back into anything relevant?
NFL.
Yeah. Speaking of the NFL, they stole one of our coaches right out from under us. We'll talk about that. We will talk about maybe Steve Wilks' replacement. We don't know who it is, but maybe we do. And then we'll talk Mizzou basketball. But before we do any of that, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel leave us a review on the podcast service you listen to us on. And if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do that at our Patreon page, patreon.com/Missouri Sports Pod. Okay, Kyle, Steve Wilks, he's gone. He was the defensive coordinator for the Missouri Tigers for exactly 1 season, and he is no longer.
What a character arc for Steve Wilks.
It looked like for maybe a little while he might not even make it a full season.
I know. I think, halfway through the year, I think a lot of Mizzou fans, maybe even us, we were kind of like, if he was gone, if he just didn't walk into the facilities tomorrow, I don't think anybody would be that upset. The defense is historically awful. They look like they didn't want to be playing, first of all. I think there was a couple of games, maybe the Tennessee game in particular, I think they just waved the white flag and gave up pretty much.
And the Tennessee game felt like a culmination of what had kind of happened the previous 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, I think that was the last game for Jethro Franklin as well. So, yeah, there was a lot of questions about the defense 4 or 5 games into the season. Then all of a sudden they start making this pretty miraculous turnaround. I think Al Davis is probably to thank for that in some respect, but I also think that, it just takes players, especially college players, it can take them a long time to learn a scheme, and, the game moves quickly. You got to figure out, you got to understand the scheme and kind of adjust to game speed quickly, and that can take a few games, and obviously that happened for Missouri. I guess I was kind of hoping Steve Wilks would stick around for another year, the way that things were going. It's just, I think consistency is a good thing. It's rare in college football. But you look at Steve Wilks' career, he was jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
His whole career, he's done that.
Yeah. And
he's been good places. He's been not so good places. It doesn't really matter. He's not there for very long. So, I'm not super surprised by this. I think the NFL seems to be where his heart is, and I think that he's probably better suited for it.
I kind of have mixed feelings, even just the Mizzou side of things, but also since I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, it's kind of interesting. Panthers fans are ecstatic, and they are also referring to him already as interim head coach Steve Wilks, anticipating maybe him taking that job title from Matt Rule at some point this following season. I don't know about that, but
what do you feel about Matt Rule? You like him as your head coach?
Yeah, he's had some bad injury luck. They haven't really had a quarterback that's starting NFL caliber yet, in my opinion. So we'll see. Hopefully they don't draft the kid from Pittsburgh who had Temple ties with Matt Rule. I don't like that idea. I'd rather have the guy from Liberty.
I hope he's
honestly.
Hope he's not listening. Hurt his feelings.
Yeah, probably. Steve Wilks is out. He's with the Carolina Panthers now, and now we will have the 3rd defensive coordinator in 3 seasons for Eli Drinkwitz. Year 1 it was Ryan Walters. Year 2 Steve Wilks, and now we'll have a new one for year 3. I do want to back up real quick and just mention it was kind of interesting seeing the news come through that Wilks was being interviewed for certain positions. He was interviewed for the Giants defensive coordinator position, but they went with somebody else. And then he was interviewing for the Panthers, and then pretty quickly it was coming down the line that he accepted the Panthers job.
Yeah, I feel like once I heard about that he interviewed for that, it was just a few minutes.
Yeah.
Between when I heard about that and whenever it was announced he was leaving for the position. So it happened very quickly.
Well, good luck to him. Wish we could have gotten to know him a little bit better. The good news is it doesn't seem like he was too terribly involved in recruiting. So it's not like we have defensive recruits coming in that were specifically tied to him that might go elsewhere now. Mm-hmm. And they're obviously not going to follow him to the NFL, at least not right away. Hopefully they will in the future. So now what? We need a new defensive coordinator, or do we? Do we need a new safeties coach, actually? That's my question to you, Kyle.
I think what you're getting at is probably what's going to happen, and that I do think Missouri is going to promote Blake Baker, who is currently the safeties coach.
I think so, yeah.
He's been no, he's not linebackers, he's safeties.
Yeah, he's been that for 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks.
Not very long. I do think that he is going to be the new defensive coordinator at Missouri. He's got some experience in the past as a defensive coordinator. And it just kind of does seem like the natural progression. I think there's been some talk about whether or not Coach Drinkwitz hired him knowing that he would become the defensive coordinator at some point.
That's not a far-fetched idea.
It's not impossible. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Maybe Coach knew that Steve Wilks was wanting to get back into the NFL eventually. I think that generally, if you're a head coach, which we're not, but I'm just guessing, if as a head coach you want to surround yourself with good experience, coaches who are experienced, coaches who have done good things in the past, and so you want to hire a guy like Blake Baker, who's been a defensive coordinator. So if something does happen, you've got somebody to turn to that you can trust. So, obviously, I think that Blake Baker was hired because of his experience. I don't know if he was hired, to step into the role, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it is interesting that Drinkwitz, we talked about this last week, he did specifically mention the fact that Baker would kind of be a little bit elevated in as far as all the defensive position coaches and stuff. He specifically said that Baker would be the number 2 in that room, working directly with Steve Wilks.
Yeah, I mean, whether he knew ahead of time or not, it was a great hire, and I think everybody was pretty happy about it at the time of the announcement, and it looks even better now.
So are you as happy with him potentially being defensive coordinator as you were with him potentially being safeties coach?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that he typically in the past he's run a little bit of like 4-2-5 defense, and that's a lot of what Missouri ran this year. I think it won't hopefully be as a huge transition. We talked about consistency. I think that's really important in college sports when the players are younger. It's harder sometimes for an entire defense to switch to something completely different. And college football season is just not that long, and sometimes it kind of sucks to have to watch a team adjust for half the season before they finally get a scheme down. So consistency, I think, is important.
Yeah, if Baker is the defensive coordinator, again, nothing is official yet, but it seems like that might be where we're headed. I would think that the defense will look pretty similar to what we saw last year. So that'll definitely be helpful for the players at least. Because it really does seem like Baker's the guy, I thought it would be worth just kind of detailing his coaching career so far in a little bit more detail than we did when we announced him when we announced to the world that he was going to be the safeties coach. So he was a linebacker at Tulane in the early 2000s, 2000 to 2004. He was a graduate assistant at Texas under Manny Diaz, and you'll see as I go, he kind of followed Manny Diaz around, so Diaz sure seemed to like him. He was a safeties coach at Arkansas State under Brian Harsin. Notably, that's where he coached with Coach Drinkwitz. Then he was the Boise State Director of Player Personnel. But I think that was only for a month because then he became the safeties coach at Louisiana Tech under Manny Diaz. Then Diaz almost immediately left for the Mississippi State defensive coordinator position. So then Baker was the defensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech for 4 seasons. And they were pretty good. They were, I think, finished second in their division 3 out of the 4 seasons. Then he was defensive coordinator at Miami, again under Manny Diaz. And it was pretty so-so. Miami was kind of so-so. They had a winning record under Diaz, but there was, if you read some articles out of Miami from those early days, it seems like maybe the administration wasn't completely behind Diaz. And that was just this past offseason that we saw Mario Cristobal from Oregon. They were courting him to be their new head coach before they had let go of Manny Diaz.
Really strange.
But specifically for Blake Baker, he was the defensive coordinator for 2 seasons, and then he actually had his play calling duties on defense taken away, and that reverted back to Manny Diaz, the head coach. And when that happened, Baker went ahead and left for LSU. So he most recently was the linebackers and co-defensive coordinator at LSU just for 1 season, because then they had a entirely new staff when Brian Kelly came in. So he was available for Missouri to snatch him up.
Kind of just following along with you going through that. It's so crazy to think about just the industry of college football, really from any perspective. Obviously, we think about the players a lot and, you know, how they have to deal with coaching departures and stuff like that. But, I mean, you think about even those low-level assistants like Blake Baker early on in his career. You know, he's kind of following around Diaz, and Diaz is kind of doing his thing, and so he's getting left behind a couple different places. It's just crazy to think about how ridiculous college football is, and for really everybody involved. It's just insanity.
Yeah, specifically like Diaz leaving Louisiana Tech as DC to be DC at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And Baker staying
4
and then
seasons,
he's promoted then at Louisiana Tech, and basically Diaz is like, I'll catch up with you later.
Yeah.
And he hires him at Miami.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're somebody who's really looking for consistency and you're hoping somebody sticks around for a few years, which most of us probably are, assuming they're doing well, Baker has seemed like he's wanted stability.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, at Louisiana Tech, he was there 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. Really, he was at Miami for how long? 2 or 3 seasons?
2 seasons, and then before the 3rd season is when he lost play calling duties.
He only left because of a strange situation. Yeah. So it seems like somebody that might want to stick around for a little while. He's a pretty young guy.
Yeah. If he does end up being the defensive coordinator, I'll be pretty happy with it.
Yeah, for sure. We keep talking about him like he's a shoe-in, and he might be.
Yeah, it just would be a little bit strange I mean, it's a little bit late in the game, honestly, in the off season to be trying to find a defensive coordinator.
That's true.
From somewhere else, but we'll see. Like spring practices start in like 2 weeks.
You mentioned real quick one more thing before we move on. You mentioned Brian Harsin's name.
Yeah.
What do you think? He's going to be the coach at Auburn next year?
Jeez, it sure doesn't seem like it. That seems like a situation I mean, it's pretty funny because I don't really care about Auburn fans at all.
Hilarious.
And just the idea that they moved on from Gus Malzahn, who like beat Alabama multiple times, which what more could you want from an Auburn football coach than to beat Alabama?
Right.
Even if you don't win 10 games every season.
Kind of like the anti-Georgia, like Mark Richt situation almost, where for Georgia it worked out perfectly. Yeah. Like better than you could have ever imagined. Right. Like Georgia feels like they were deserving of probably.
Yes.
And Auburn is like the opposite happened for them.
It's only 1 season in, but it's one of those things where like if they bring him back, that's so awkward. But at the same time, who are they going to replace him with? I mean, are you going to have people, you know, lining up for this head coaching job? I guess maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ways you can look at it. Is Brian Harsin's probably going to get fired. I think he has an $18 million buyout. I think I saw that. So they're going to potentially pay this man $18 million just to not coach there anymore. So, I mean, you could look at it as like, well, I might get a couple years at Auburn. I'm going to make it so much money and just go away. Or you could look at it as like, I don't even want to deal with the insanity that is Auburn. And even I don't care how much money's involved.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's going to have to be a big name, whoever it is, if they fire Harsin.
I have a feeling Auburn fans are not going to be happy no matter what.
I think you're right. That's college sports for you.
One reason Auburn fans could be happy, though, is because they're getting a bunch of money from the SEC. Yeah. So is the University of Missouri. Yeah. I can't remember the dollar amounts, but it's like...
I think it's like $55 million is like their yearly distribution, and then like another $23 million from COVID, so roughly $77 million this year.
That's pretty good.
From the SEC. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
We'll take it. Yeah, I wonder how that stacks up to like what Big 12 schools get from like their share of the Longhorn Network.
I don't know. I don't think it's as much as you might think, honestly. I don't think it's as big of a difference as you might think, but it's probably 12 mil difference.
It's pretty good.
It's a guess.
Any other news before we move on to basketball? I think that's about it. That's pretty big news, losing your defensive coordinator 2 weeks before spring practices start.
Oh, man. Yeah.
All right. So on the basketball side of things, Missouri won a game and lost a game since we last spoke. They had a little bit of an upset, beat Texas A&M on the road by 4. They won that game 70-66. A good road win. Gave A&M their 6th straight loss, which is now 7 because they lost since the Mizzou game. And we saw the good Missouri Tiger offense led by Kobe Brown. He had 21 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 blocks in 38 minutes of action. Was getting to the free throw line, 11 of 12 from the charity stripe. And another significant contributor, Boogie Coleman, 12 points, 4 of 8 from 3. Missouri's offense looked pretty good. A little bit of a scare late, but they held on. Solid win. I was really happy. It was actually a fun game to watch. We haven't had too many of those.
I was just about to say, college basketball is so fun when you're winning. Yeah. And man, I miss being relevant like normally. And
I think we've addressed this question specifically before about getting your heart ripped out in a heartbreaking loss versus just getting blown out and knowing you're not going to be in it. They're playing good basketball, but still losing a close game. Give me that. I mean, I probably just go back and forth. I probably will take whichever one's not happening. If you ask me this after a big blowout.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But
it's good to feel emotions as a human being sometimes,
Yeah, and when you're getting blown out and you can basically just turn the TV off and not care about it, then
right. I think it's better to feel something, even though
it's better to have loved and lost.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, everything went really well for the Missouri offense. They were moving the ball well, finding open shooters. They shot 64% from 2, 39% from 3, getting to the free throw line.
How many threes did they attempt in this game?
13.
That's ideal right there.
Yeah.
I mean, Konzo's talked about this a little bit publicly in press conferences and stuff about how that's obviously not their strength, and maybe it took them a little too long to figure that out this season, or at least to actually
make the change,
make an actionable change. But it seems like they've actually kind of found the sweet spot with that recently, and haven't taken as many threes. Now Vanderbilt is a little different story. We'll get to that, but the Texas A&M game, which is in my opinion perfect shot selection as far as how many threes they took and all that stuff, and they shot pretty well too.
Yeah, and who's taking the threes? Coleman, one of the better 3-point shooters, he's taken 8 threes. I mean, he was hot. But then, I mean, that's 4 of the 5 makes were Coleman.
Yeah.
So nobody was really forcing it too much. A little bit different in the Vanderbilt game. Let's see what else here. So Missouri had 16 assists on the game. I mentioned 6 of those coming from Kobe. So he looked really good. He had definitely been slumping a little bit. Basically, ever since his huge performance in the Alabama game, he just hadn't really put together a super solid game since then, but he got one here. And defensively, they really clamped down in the paint. I mentioned in our preview Henry Coleman because he had 18 points in the first matchup with Missouri. He was pretty inefficient, 3 of 9 from 2. Did get to the free throw line, only scored 13 points total. So I thought they did a good job slowing him down, and basically A&M's paint offense, their 2-point shooting, they only shot 44%. So that's usually a pretty good number for the defense. We'll mention this again after the Vanderbilt game, but Trevin Brazil, 2 blocks in the Texas A&M game.
Yeah.
He, in only 14 minutes of action, 8 points, 3 rebounds, 2 blocks.
I don't think I've been as excited for a freshman in a really, really long time, since maybe Jonte, but I knew Jonte wouldn't probably be around very long. So this is a very special player,
yeah.
And I really hope that he enjoys being at Missouri.
Yeah, definitely a player you can kind of build your program around for the next few years.
It's
hopefully.
just crazy. I literally went to the same high school as Trayvon Brazil. He's was here in Springfield. We live here in Springfield. Never saw him play a single time in high school. I mean, I knew who he was, but it's just crazy how I think he had a really late growth spurt. Was grew 5 or 6 inches, his junior or senior year. Mm-hmm. It's just insane how late of a bloomer he was, but I just never in a million years dreamed that he would come in and be as good as he's been.
And we watched Brookshire play in the Tournament of Champions, and
that's true. Maybe
Brazil was he had to sit out
for
transfer reasons or something, because he started his high school career at Parkview. But Brookshire was the guy that is this 3-point shooting and scoring should translate to the next level because of the craftiness and finishing ability we saw from him in high school. That hasn't really shown up. But Brazil, his athleticism, blocking, and a little bit of 3-point shooting has translated.
Yeah, I mean it's so crazy. I mean, you could almost say Brazil's like almost more impactful for Missouri than he was for his high school team.
Potentially.
And I don't even think he really shot threes in high school, and he is now. And his blocking ability, like I feel like a lot of guys come out of high school that block shots in high school and they think they're just going to be able to do it at the college level, and it's totally different.
Yeah,
but Brazil,
they end up just fouling out of a lot of games.
Yeah, but Brazil literally just has continued that exactly like he did in high school.
Yeah,
swatting dudes.
Yeah, and yeah, for how early in his career it is still, his knack for getting blocked shots is elite.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't take for granted how easy he makes it look, because that is not normal stuff for a college freshman. Anything else about this Texas A&M game? It was just such a joy to watch good basketball, honestly. And if you close your eyes for the entire first half of the Vanderbilt game, then you got to watch more good basketball, because they were not bad in the second half. First half was pretty ugly for both teams. Missouri only scored 22 points in the first half against Vanderbilt. They did lose the game 70-62. Missouri was 0 for 11 from 3 in the first half against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt played most of the game in a zone defense and basically just dared Missouri to shoot the ball over the top of it. Missouri obliged them and missed a lot of threes. Shot way too many threes, missed a lot of them. 5 of 25.
Yeah, 25 is way too many. And kind of like what I said earlier, Konzo came out publicly, criticized them for shooting that many threes, and he's like, he was like frustrated with them for kind of going away from the game plan, and I would be frustrated too.
Yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt's a pretty good defensive team, and obviously they were going to force Missouri to shoot from deep. And man, yeah, I mean, just looking down the box score, Kobe 0 for 2, Davis 0 for 3, Coleman 0 for 3, Pickett 0 for 2, DeGray 1 for 5.
Yeah, they were
Yaya Keita 0 for 1.
They're not even guarding DeGray. I mean, he had an open three on every possession if he wanted it.
Yeah. So Trevin Brazil made a 3, looked good shooting it, and Caleb Brown made 2 3-pointers in the most ridiculous fashion imaginable.
Yeah, so
I thought the first one was kind of crazy.
Yeah,
and then he outdid himself.
Yeah, they made 5 total, and 2 of those were just completely random desperation threes by Caleb Brown, who basically never shoots.
Like NBA range plus shot clock expiring threes. Like one of them, he had to like step into it, and like heave it, but it went down. Scottie Pippen Jr. I mean, Vanderbilt had a pretty rough first half too. They outscored Missouri, but didn't look very good. Scottie Pippen Jr. I think was held to 4 points in the first half. Ended up with 19.
Still less than we thought he was going to score.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, he kind of came to form in the second half.
I feel like Vanderbilt looked more well-rounded than I was expecting. You know, I haven't watched them a ton this year, only a few times, but they seemed pretty well-rounded against Missouri.
Yeah. They're not bad. They might be in trouble next year when Scottie Pippen leaves.
Yeah, he makes everything work for sure.
Yeah. But they've still got some other pretty decent guards. So Missouri still shot okay from 2, 56%, but shot 25 threes. And also, there's one factor that I haven't mentioned yet. Vanderbilt went to the free throw line 35 times.
That's insane.
Made 24 of them. Missouri went to the free throw line 12 times, made 7 of them.
Does Vanderbilt normally get fouled that much?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they're good at that.
Yep.
But 35 to 12.
That's a lot.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's more than 3 times as many free throw attempts.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Overall, I mean, I don't know. I guess there's been a lot of talk on Twitter about the free throw situation specifically from game to game, and it is kind of crazy. Like, if you look at SEC games and then you take away like late game, we're just fouling to stop the clock fouls. When Missouri is called for more fouls, Missouri's been called for more fouls than their opponent in SEC games. Takeaway, end of game fouls in every single SEC loss. They have been called for fewer fouls against Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. The 3 wins. So far in SEC play, that has been the determining factor.
That seems correlated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why Missouri doesn't get called for a lot of fouls. And we talked about this a little bit last week. They don't have very many players who can successfully drive to the basket. They fumble the ball around. They get it stolen.
They look out of control, so then they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt on a reach-in type steal situation.
Right. And a lot of times they just don't do it. And they don't drive to the basket all that consistently in comparison to a team like Vanderbilt, where Scottie Pippen Jr. is probably doing it 10 times a game or whatever, you know. So I understand why Missouri maybe doesn't get called as many fouls, but 35-12 though, I don't know. That seems
foul
absurd.
calls, just straight up foul calls. Missouri was committed 27 fouls to Vanderbilt's 14.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
I mean, part of it is personnel a little bit from Missouri, but it's not like Deshaun Gordon is unathletic, you know? It's not like Amari Davis is slow. They're still getting called for fouls. And this was actually the first game of the season that Kobe Brown fouled out of. In 27 minutes, 9 points, 9 rebounds, 5 fouls. Yeah, I don't know. There were a few calls late in this game. Like there was like back-to-back possessions where Missouri got called for a foul on a reach-in steal attempt that looked pretty clean.
Yeah.
And then the very next possession, I think I have it backwards. The first possession, Missouri had the ball. Vanderbilt stole it. And then the next possession down, Vanderbilt has the ball. Missouri steals it, but gets called for a reach in just very similar situations.
I feel like Missouri gets called for that kind of stuff so often, like little hand check stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel like overall the officiating was decent in this game. There were just a few calls at the end that I disagreed with. I don't know. It's definitely not getting to the free throw line is not Missouri's strength. And when they go up against a team that is their strength, then you're going to have a pretty crazy disparity like this one.
Felt like Vanderbilt made a lot of free throws too. Just felt like they shot pretty well.
Yeah, they did make a lot of free throws, 24.
Okay, percentage-wise.
Percentage-wise, under 70%.
Yeah.
Missouri got out-rebounded as well. And the only thing Missouri did well consistently was they didn't turn the ball over too much. So that was good. But yeah, fouling way too much. Not forcing turnovers, not getting rebounds, not making threes, not getting to the free throw line. Those are all things that will equal a loss. Trevin Brazile, 12th game out of the 15 he's played in with multiple blocked shots. Balked shots.
Took a step off the mound.
He balked.
Yes. Sorry. Sorry about that.
12th game this year for Brazile with multiple blocks. He's pretty good.
He's good.
Missouri is now 9-14 overall, 3-7 in SEC play. KenPom rating of 130 on offense, 151 on defense. With now that they've played 10 conference games, they are 10th in the SEC in offensive efficiency, 13th in defensive efficiency. Kyle, guess which team is 14th in the SEC in defensive efficiency? Nobody else is going to know. Don't worry about it.
We're in the spot here. No, man, I have no idea. Ole Miss?
LSU.
Really?
Yeah. Bad.
What's Ole Miss? Who knows? I feel like LSU has not been quite as good as they were starting off the year. They were, really, really good at the beginning of the year, like halfway through the season.
Kyle, I made a mistake. LSU is 14th in offensive efficiency.
Really?
Yes.
In the SEC?
Yes. In
Well,
SEC play.
That's more surprising.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That was the whole thing I was going for there. I'm just literally said the exact wrong thing.
Okay, nice.
Georgia 14th.
Oh, Georgia, yeah.
Georgia
I
14th
forgot about that
on
team.
defense.
They're terrible.
You ready to look ahead at
sure
the two
am.
matchups for this week? We have a rematch at home against Ole Miss. Ole Miss 12-12 on the season, 3-8 in SEC play. Missouri won the previous matchup 78-53 on the road behind Amari Davis's 10 for 10 shooting performance. This is actually a really big game. Both teams with 3 wins in conference play. If Missouri wants to avoid that bottom 4 in the conference and having to play in the first day of the SEC tournament, this is a must-win.
Yeah.
I think if they lose this game, I honestly don't think there's any way they get out of the bottom 4.
It still seems crazy that they have a chance to avoid the bottom 4 with how mediocre they've been. But, I mean, they have a couple games go their way, like a couple of those close games like Auburn or, whoever, Florida. Let's just say they beat Auburn and Florida. They're literally 6th or 7th place in the SEC.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Missouri has an outside shot at getting to 7 conference wins, and then and by default they would have a couple tiebreakers there, and that would get them out of the bottom 4. So if you want something to root for down the stretch with not too many games left, that's something to keep an eye on.
I feel like the remainder of the schedule is fairly light.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Yeah, not too bad.
Still got to play Tennessee.
Right. I think we play Mississippi State back-to-back games. They're
That's true.
top 50-ish team. Beating Vanderbilt would have been really cool as far as...
Yeah. It would have been cool? Beating Auburn.
Yeah. Auburn lost to Arkansas.
Yeah.
We're about to talk about Arkansas, but let me just look back real quick at the first time we played Ole Miss. Missouri shot the ball incredibly well. 64% from 2, 57% from 3, 4 of 7.
And there you go.
And 71% from the free throw line. They had 31 defensive rebounds and 18 assists, which is a lot for this Missouri Tiger team.
That was definitely the best game they played this year, I think.
Yeah, they looked really good. Alabama, but this was on the road.
That's fair.
I mean, 15-point win on the road.
Yeah, Ole Miss is not as good as I think I thought they were at the time.
Yeah, that's totally possible. One random little stat from that game: Caleb Brown, 4 rebounds and 4 assists in 8 minutes of play. I honestly don't know how you do that.
Good. Yeah. What about Amari Davis, 10 for 10? Was that game?
Yes, that was that game.
Some weird statistical anomalies.
Yeah. Something tells me no Missouri Tigers are going to shoot 10 for 10 from the field.
Ever again.
In this match. Yeah, potentially ever again.
Is this old Kermit Davis's last trip to Columbia, Missouri?
That's possible.
As a Ole Miss coach, not like in his life necessarily or anything.
He is free to travel to Columbia almost whenever he wants. So, but still, it could be his last time ever stepping foot in the state of Missouri. I don't know, though. I think they'll bring him back for one more season. I think there's some Ole Miss fans that should be thinking twice about getting rid of Andy Kennedy when they did.
Yeah.
That was a situation that I kind of scratched my head, but he had been there a long time, and maybe it was just time to shuffle things around a little bit.
I think so.
But you don't always end up better when you do that.
All I'm going to say, Andy Kennedy, pretty good job at UAB.
Yep.
I don't know why I would say that. There's no reason why I would be looking at other coaches' performances around the league or anything.
He's recruited pretty well in the SEC before, gone to the NCAA tournament, had good performances in the league that the Missouri Tigers play in. Anyway, you mentioned Auburn losing to Arkansas.
Yeah.
That is the 9th game in a row that Arkansas has won.
I kind of feel like Auburn was flirting with disaster.
Absolutely.
They should have lost to Missouri. They almost lost to Georgia. but they've had to play both those games on the road, and obviously, so somebody was going to beat Auburn, and of course it was Arkansas.
But maybe they will just celebrate that win too much and not be paying attention when they come to Mizzou Arena. Obviously, Arkansas won the previous matchup in Fayetteville by 3 zillion points.
Maybe more.
JD Note had 19. Arkansas shot 28 of 45 from 2. That's 62%. And Missouri turned the ball over 23 times in that matchup. What do you think? Are we going to see more of the same? Are we going to get a real nice, juicy homestand where we get 2 back-to-back wins?
No, probably not. But I think we'll see 2 good games.
Good game against Arkansas?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be competitive.
Okay.
It's not going to be a 43-point loss again, I don't think, or whatever it was.
Are we going to beat Ole Miss?
I think so. I think we'll beat Ole Miss. I think we'll lose to Arkansas by 6.
That sounds pretty good.
Shoot less threes.
I'll take that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think Missouri has any way of slowing down JD Note.
No.
I think he will do whatever he wants. And as far as Ole Miss goes, maybe losing to Missouri and then ending up second to last in the conference, that might actually be enough to send Kermit Davis packing.
Yeah.
Man.
Maybe they could get Andy Kennedy.
Ole Miss probably could.
Yeah, that's a good coach.
Oh, man. It sucks when Missouri's not very good and Arkansas is good. I don't know how the greater Missouri fan base feels about that rivalry, but I like it. And I especially on the basketball side, we've had some really good games against them, some overtime games, heartbreakers, questionable calls at the end of a couple games.
Yeah.
We usually do pretty well against them at home.
I feel like the football and basketball rivalries have been pretty good. I feel like a lot of people don't want to recognize it as a rivalry because it was kind of forced or whatever, but I mean, I think there's been some good games.
Yeah, I agree. I'll embrace it. I didn't mention at the top, but Arkansas, after having a terrible non-conference schedule as far as difficulty, it was really easy. They won a ton of games. They started SEC play really shakily. Now they're 8-3 and have won 9 games in a row. So they are hot. Yeah, coming into Missouri.
Yep.
I'm going to just copy your prediction. I agree. I think they're going to beat Ole Miss by 6, but I think they're going to lose to Arkansas by 9. Not quite as close.
You see, Eric Musselman was shirtless in the celebration. He's something else.
That should have been us.
Yeah.
That should have been Konzo Martin shirtless in the middle of the students storming the court.
I will say, when Konzo was the coach at Missouri State back in, this would have been probably 2011.
Yeah.
When Missouri State won the regular season Missouri Valley Conference title, Konzo was amped, man. He was going crazy.
This just secured me a job in the SEC.
That was a young Konzo, though. Yeah, that was almost a different guy than I feel like he is now.
I'm going to get to go to Tennessee.
Yeah.
That's what he was thinking.
Probably.
Little did he know. Not a fun time there.
Yeah.
I hope he's having a better time in Columbia.
Probably not. Well, yeah, he definitely is. But
he has had a better time.
It's been a rough year, though.
Yeah.
But he's rich.
That is true.
He's very wealthy.
And this team is playing better than they did at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I think they've improved.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I've changed my mind about anything big picture.
No, I haven't really either.
And I know some people have wanted us to talk about big picture, Konzo Martin, this, that, make the argument, this, one way or the other. We'll get to that. We got a few more weeks of the season, and then we'll get into that juicy topic.
Yeah.
When it's time to analyze the season.
Trust us, we are excited.
We will. We're very happy to talk about that, and we're a few weeks away.
That all for this week?
I think so.
All right. Special thank you to our Patreon supporters at the $10 level and above: Britt Treese, Brian Smith, Ryan Lee, Tristan, Ben Smith, Parker, Daddy JD, Luis Hernandez, Tim Keynes, and Tyler Harsel. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We are on Twitter at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
You can find our stickers on our online shop. We're working on getting some more t-shirts up there. Thank you guys for selling us out on those. MissouriSportsPod.BigCartel.com.
Thank you everyone for listening. We will see you next week after a win.